Jason wasn't exactly a fan of trying new places. He was the kind of guy who believed that no restaurant could ever be as good as the ones he already knew. His followers loved his food reviews, which usually involved picking apart every detail with his sharp opinions. So when his friends invited him to try a new spot in town, he wasn't excited, but he went anyway, more out of obligation than anything else. This place is getting all this hype, his friend Mark said, scrolling through his phone. It's called Shaq's Kitchen or something. Big Shaq owns it, apparently. Jason wasn't impressed. Yeah, okay, he muttered, eyes still glued to his phone. Another one-of celebrity opening a restaurant. I'm sure it's great. His friends, used to Jason's sarcastic tone, shrugged it off. They had learned long ago that getting Jason to admit anything was like pulling teeth. He wasn't easily impressed, and he loved playing the role of the critic, even if it wasn't always deserved. When they walked into the restaurant, Jason barely looked around. He had no intention of being wowed by anything here. The place was nice enough, but it wasn't anything special. A mix of modern and industrial decor with pictures of famous guests and sports memorabilia on the walls. Jason thought it looked like a place trying too hard to be cool. He rolled his eyes. The hostess smiled and led them to their table. Right this way, she said, leading them past tables of people laughing and chatting. Jason barely noticed the smiles, the excitement in the air. His eyes were only focused on the menu in front of him, already looking for flaws. Mac and cheese as a main dish? He snorted, not caring who heard him. That's the kind of thing a place with no idea about real food would serve. They're just trying to be quirky. His friends glanced at him nervously. They had expected this. Mark tried to steer the conversation to something else, but Jason was already in full critic mode. He muttered about the overpriced prices and unoriginal dishes, even though he hadn't tasted a single bite yet. As they settled in, a tall man in a tracksuit entered the room. He had a calm, confident presence, and he flashed a warm smile at the staff as he walked past. Jason didn't think much of it, dismissing him as just another guy walking through the door. He was too busy making sarcastic remarks about the place to care. The man stopped briefly by their table, nodding a friendly hello. Jason barely acknowledged him, too wrapped up in complaining about the lighting and how the ambience was trying way too hard. The man smiled, said something to the staff in the back, and disappeared into the kitchen. Seriously, Jason said with a sigh. This place is everything wrong with the food industry. Overhyped and underwhelming. Little did Jason know, the person he had just insulted was not just another guest. He had no idea who the man was, or that he was about to learn a very big lesson. The food arrived quickly, and Jason's disappointment grew with each dish placed in front of him. He didn't even wait to see what the others thought before he started his critique. Look at this, he muttered, waving his hand dismissively at the plate in front of him. This looks like something a kid would throw together for a school project. His friends exchanged awkward glances, but Jason was too focused on the food to notice. The mac and cheese was creamy, with a golden, crispy top, but Jason didn't care about the effort behind it. Too much cheese, he said, scooping a bite onto his fork. This isn't real food, just some gimmick. You can tell they're trying to impress people by throwing a bunch of stuff together. He chewed, his expression unchanged, and then immediately went for the next dish. It was a burger, big and juicy with a side of crispy fries. This is just a regular burger, Jason continued, now practically talking to no one in particular. Nothing special. They'd probably just thrown it on the menu because people like burgers. As Jason continued his rant, he didn't notice the quiet figure who had been walking closer and closer to the table. The same man from earlier, the one in the tracksuit, was now standing just behind him. His calm, warm smile had disappeared, replaced by a look that was hard to read. Jason, too caught up in his critique, didn't stop. He was in his element, delivering one opinion after another. Who are they trying to fool? Jason scoffed as he stabbed his fork into the side of the burger. This is like something you get at one of those chain places that's pretending to be fancy. Give me a real meal, not this. He paused mid-sentence. He hadn't expected a response, but a deep voice interrupted his tirade. Jason's face turned bright red. He opened his mouth to say something, anything, but the words didn't come. His mind was racing, trying to figure out how to dig himself out of this mess. Big Shaq stood there, still watching him with a calm but serious expression, waiting for an apology that Jason didn't know how to give. The air felt thick with tension. Jason cleared his throat, trying to make light of the situation. "Look, I didn't mean it like that," he said quickly, his voice wavering. "I was just joking around. Food critic stuff." Big Shaq's eyebrow raised slightly, but he didn't say anything. The silence stretched on, and Jason could feel his friend's eyes on him, their discomfort growing by the second. Mark shifted in his seat, looking like he wanted to disappear. Jason was usually the loudest one in the group, confident and unafraid of anyone. But this was different. This wasn't just some random chef or restaurant owner he could brush off with a smirky comment. This was someone who clearly took pride in what he did. Jason took a deep breath, trying to salvage whatever dignity he had left. "It's just," he started, his tone growing defensive, "this place is getting all this hype, and honestly, I don't see what's so special about it. I had better burgers at places that don't charge as much." The tension at the table was thick. Jason could feel the eyes of his friends on him, but he wasn't sure how to fix this. Big Shaq had just called him out, and he had nothing to say in his defense. The food he had so easily dismissed now felt like it carried more weight. His earlier remarks seemed childish, even cruel, in comparison to the pride Shaq had in his restaurant. The silence stretched on for a moment longer before Big Shaq spoke again. "How about this?" he said, breaking the awkwardness. "You're not a fan of the food, right? How about you come with me to the kitchen? Maybe you'll see why it's more than just what's on the plate." Jason blinked, surprised by the suggestion. He had expected to be kicked out or at least told off. But instead, Shaq was inviting him behind the scenes. It wasn't an apology or an angry outburst. It was an invitation to understand. Jason felt a mix of embarrassment and curiosity. He didn't know what he expected, but it definitely wasn't this. Okay," Jason said slowly, glancing at his friends. They looked as surprised as he felt, but no one objected. They all watched as Big Shaq motioned for Jason to follow him. They stood up and walked toward the back of the restaurant, passing through a small hallway and into the kitchen. The moment they entered, the sound of sizzling food, clattering pans, and the hum of a busy kitchen surrounded them. Chefs moved quickly, chopping vegetables, flipping burgers, and plating dishes. The air was warm, filled with the smell of spices, grilled meat, and fresh herbs. It was nothing like the sterile, quiet atmosphere Jason had imagined when he thought of kitchens. This was real, alive with energy and purpose. Big Shaq led Jason through the hustle and bustle, nodding at the chefs as they worked. "This," Shaq said, "this is where everything happens. These are the people who put their hearts into making every single dish you saw out there. The mac and cheese, the burgers, everything." He motioned to a group of chefs working at a long counter, chopping, stirring, and preparing fresh ingredients. Jason took it all in, suddenly feeling out of place. This wasn't a fancy restaurant trying to impress with decoration or gimmicks. This was real work, real effort. He could see the pride in the chefs' faces, the focus in their eyes. Each movement was deliberate, coordinated, as if they were crafting something that meant more than just a meal. "You see," Big Shaq continued, "this isn't just about food. It's about family, community, and sharing something that brings people together. I didn't open this place to make money or be famous. I opened it because food is something you share with the people you care about. And when you disrespect that, it's not just about the food. It's about the people who make it." Jason was quiet. He watched a chef carefully plate a dish, then glanced up at him. The chef smiled, nodding respectfully. Jason felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He had spent so much time making fun of this place, without ever considering the people behind it, the effort it took to create something meaningful. Everything he had said seemed petty now. "So, do you get it now?" Big Shaq asked, his tone soft but firm. "It's not just a restaurant. It's a place where people put everything into what they do. It's their life's work." Jason nodded, slowly absorbing the weight of Shaq's words. He didn't know what to say, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to look at food the same way again. Jason stood there in the kitchen, still processing everything Big Shaq had just said. The noise of the kitchen seemed to fade into the background as he looked around, watching the chefs move with precision, each person doing their part to create something greater. It felt different now. What had once seemed like just food was now part of something much bigger, something Jason had never bothered to see before. Big Shaq turned to Jason with a small smile, his arms crossed. "You look like you're thinking it over," he said. "That's good." Jason nodded, but didn't speak right away. The guilt was eating at him. He'd spent so much time mocking the food, making fun of everything without considering the effort behind it. It wasn't just about the taste. It was about the passion, the history, the people who had worked so hard to make each dish. He had only seen the surface, and now it felt like he had been blind to everything else. Before he could find the right words to apologize, a voice came from behind them. "Hey, Shaq, everything good out there?" Jason turned and saw a man in a chef's jacket walking over. He was tall, with a friendly face and a slight smile that seemed to be part of the job. But it wasn't just any chef. It was the same guy from earlier, the one Jason had assumed was just another customer. Jason blinked, realizing he recognized him now. The way he carried himself, the familiarity with the staff, it clicked. This was the person behind everything, the person he had been insulting without realizing it. Jason felt his stomach drop. Big Shaq noticed Jason's reaction and grinned, clearly amused by the surprise. "Yeah, that's right," he said. "You've been insulting the guy who actually owns this place. I'm Big Shaq, by the way." He extended his hand with a chuckle. Jason stood there, frozen for a moment, his face turning even more red. He had spent the entire evening criticizing the very person who had poured so much of himself into the restaurant. The embarrassment was almost too much to handle. He reached out, shaking Shaq's hand, but words didn't come easily. I didn't realize." Jason started, his voice trailing off. I didn't know." "I get it," Big Shaq said, his voice surprisingly warm. "Most people don't. They see a restaurant like this and think it's just about food, but it's more than that. It's about family, memories, and the people who trust you to give them a good meal. It's not just me, it's all of us." Jason nodded slowly. His mind was racing, trying to find something to say to make up for everything he had said earlier. But nothing seemed right. How do you apologize for something like that? How do you take back insults that cut so deep? Big Shaq seemed to sense Jason's struggle. "Don't worry about it," he said, his tone easygoing. "Just remember, next time you're reviewing something, try to see the bigger picture. Understand what goes into it before you make your judgment." Jason was quiet for a moment, then finally found the words he needed. "I'm really sorry," he said sincerely. "I didn't mean to disrespect anyone. I was just too focused on myself, I guess." Big Shaq nodded again, his smile returning. "That's all right. You'll get it next time." As Jason stood there in the kitchen, feeling the weight of the moment, he realized something important. It wasn't just about food. It wasn't even just about a bad review. It was about the people, the hard work, and the love that went into everything. And for the first time that night, Jason felt like he understood. Jason walked back to his table slowly, his mind still spinning. The weight of what had just happened was sinking in. He had spent years being known as the tough food critic, tearing apart restaurants with his sharp words, never giving a second thought to the people behind the dishes. But now, everything felt different. He couldn't stop thinking about Shaq's words, about the love, the history, and the hard work that went into each plate of food. It wasn't just about taste. It was about something deeper. His friends were waiting for him, and when Jason sat down, they all looked at him with a mix of curiosity and concern. "So, what happened?" Mark asked, his voice low. Jason looked up, meeting his friend's eyes. He knew Mark was probably expecting some sarcastic remark, maybe a joke about how ridiculous the whole situation was. But there was no joke coming, no witty comment. All Jason felt was a quiet realization that he had been wrong. "I messed up," Jason said quietly, his tone serious. "I've been wrong about this place, about everything really." His friends looked at him, surprised. Jason wasn't the type to admit he was wrong. He was used to being the one with the answers, the one with the clever remarks. But right now, none of that mattered. He had learned something that was bigger than any food review. "So, what happened back there?" Mark asked, still unsure. "I got a lesson," Jason replied, looking at the food in front of him. "I thought it was just food, but it's not. It's the work, the heart, and the people who make it. Shaq, the owner, he explained it all. I didn't realize how much goes into running a place like this. There was a pause as Jason's friends digested what he said. They had never heard him speak like this before. Jason, the harsh critic, was now seeing the world in a different way. So, what are you going to do now? One of his friends asked cautiously. Jason sat back in his chair, thinking for a moment. I think I'm going to start paying more attention to what goes into the food, to what goes into the place. Maybe it's not just about whether I like it or not. Maybe it's about understanding why it's there in the first place. His friends exchanged looks, still trying to wrap their heads around the change they were seeing in Jason. But Jason didn't mind. This was something he had to figure out for himself. The world wasn't as simple as he had made it out to be. Food wasn't just a dish on a plate, a flavor to judge. It was a story, a journey, something much more personal. The waiter came back, a little hesitant now, probably unsure if Jason was still in critic mode. But Jason only nodded, smiling slightly. You can tell Shaq I said sorry, he added. He already knows, the waiter replied, giving him a knowing smile before turning to leave. Jason sat there, staring at the plate in front of him. It was the same mac and cheese he had mocked earlier, but now it looked different. It wasn't just cheese and pasta anymore. It was a part of something bigger, and for the first time, Jason was ready to appreciate it. The night was winding down and the restaurant had started to empty out. The once lively chatter and clatter of dishes slowly faded as the staff cleaned up, preparing to close for the night. Jason sat back in his chair, still processing everything that had happened. It felt like he had stepped into another world, one that he had never really understood before. His friends had noticed the shift in him too. They had been asking more questions, trying to understand what had changed. Jason didn't blame them for being curious. After all, he had been the guy who prided himself on tearing places apart with his words. Now sitting there, surrounded by the quiet hum of the restaurant, he felt like a different person. The old Jason would have made a sarcastic remark or laughed about the situation. But this time, he just wanted to listen, to learn. As the night went on, Jason found himself talking more about the experience in the kitchen. He explained how Shaq had shown him the effort and love that went into every dish. He even mentioned how he'd seen the chefs working together, each of them focusing on their part to make something bigger than just food. It wasn't just about the taste or the appearance anymore. It was about the story behind it all. So, you're saying you actually enjoyed the food? Mark asked, raising an eyebrow. After all that talk, Jason chuckled, shaking his head. It's not just about whether I liked it or not, he said. It's about understanding why it's made the way it is. I think that's what I was missing all this time. Food is about more than just what's on the plate. His friends were still trying to wrap their heads around this new Jason. They were used to him being the tough critic, the one who never held back. Now he was talking about understanding and appreciating the effort behind the food. It was a shift they hadn't expected, but it was a shift they could see. As they finished their meal, Jason made a decision. He knew he wasn't going to change overnight, but he was ready to approach things differently. He wanted to go beyond the surface, beyond the first impression. Next time he reviewed a restaurant, he was going to take the time to understand it, to see the people behind the food and the love they put into it. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be the same, but it felt like the right thing to do. Before leaving, Jason walked over to Shaq, who was still standing by the kitchen door, overseeing everything. Shaq was talking to one of the staff members, but when he saw Jason, he gave him a small nod. Jason approached him, unsure of what to say. But this time, the words came easier. Thanks for everything, Jason said, his voice sincere. I really mean it. Big Shaq smiled, giving him a respectful nod. No problem. It's all part of the process. Just remember, it's not always about what's on the plate. It's about what's behind it. Jason nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude he hadn't expected to feel. As he walked out of the restaurant, he knew this night would stay with him. It wasn't just about food anymore. It was about the people, the work, and the stories that made it all come together. The following days were different for Jason. As he went about his usual routine, visiting new restaurants and writing reviews, he couldn't shake off what had happened at Big Shaq's place. It wasn't just the food that had changed his perspective. It was the whole experience. For the first time, Jason started to think about what went into each dish, each restaurant, and each person who worked behind the scenes. The next time he walked into a restaurant, Jason paused before doing anything. He looked around, not just at the menu or the decor, but at the people, the chefs, the waiters, the staff. He thought about their stories, about the long hours they spent making sure everything was just right. He took a moment to appreciate the effort that went into creating the experience, no matter how small. It wasn't about giving every place a glowing review, but about being fair, about seeing beyond the first impression. Jason began to understand that his words had power and that he had a responsibility to be mindful of the impact they could have. He wasn't going to stop being honest in his reviews, but he was going to start being more thoughtful, more aware of the people behind the food. A week later, Jason returned to Shaq's restaurant. This time, he wasn't there to write a review or to make jokes. He just wanted to enjoy the food, to experience it like any other customer. When he walked through the door, the familiar warmth of the place greeted him, but this time it felt different. There was no judgment, no expectation. He simply sat down and ordered the same mac and cheese he had mocked before. As he ate, Jason actually enjoyed it. He didn't rush through the meal, didn't criticize every bite. He took his time savoring each flavor, thinking about the effort that had gone into creating it. For the first time, he felt like he was truly tasting the food, not just trying to find flaws. Toward the end of his meal, the waiter came over, a little hesitant. "You enjoying your meal?" he asked, his tone respectful, but with a touch of caution. Jason smiled, nodding. "Yeah, actually," he said, looking up. "It's really good." The waiter's expression softened. "Good to hear. Shaq will be happy to hear that." Jason felt a small pang of guilt. He had been so quick to judge before, so quick to dismiss the hard work of everyone in that kitchen. But now he understood. "Tell Shaq I said thanks," he added. "I've learned a lot since the last time." The waiter gave a knowing smile. "He'll be glad to hear that. It's not just about the food, right?" Jason nodded. "Exactly." As he finished his meal and paid the bill, Jason walked out of the restaurant with a sense of peace. He had learned something valuable. He wasn't just a food critic anymore. He was someone who understood that behind every plate, there was a story worth hearing, worth respecting. Walking down the street, Jason felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted. He wasn't sure what his next review would look like, but he knew one thing. He was going to write it with a new perspective, one that took into account more than just the food on the plate. He was going to tell the whole story.